everyone, to another Design Ops Aligned podcast. And today we have a brilliant guest who's going to be speaking about something I have not brought on the show before. And I guess it's a bit weird that I've not brought this topic onto the show at all, because it's such an important skill to have within this design field. And I'm glad that Amanda has given some time to us today to really speak about this in depth. We're going to be speaking a lot about workshops and the general, I would say, benefits that workshops bring into the design field. And Amanda has a lot of knowledge in this field. So welcome, Amanda, to the Design of the Line podcast show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah. Did you like that introduction? Just warming
That was
up the
great.
scene now. So,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Using it, and people curious. Oh, workshops. Okay, never been on. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit strange. It's strange. I've had so many people come on the show. And sorry, I'm going to give the chance for you to do an introduction, but it's so weird. I brought so many people on who talk about, it's communication. Communication is where we're lacking. We don't know how to speak the language of product managers. And then workshops and the general, I would say, power of what workshops can bring is something I did not look into last season. And I think it's something that every single designer within their arsenal needs in order to be successful in this field. So
Yeah. And in essence, it's just a word, right? Like, we can put a lot of focus on it or not. I like that it's distinct from meetings or from gatherings or from brainstorms, right? When you invite someone to something, how you invite them and what you're calling it has meaning and sets the tone. And so it feels different if you're joining a meeting versus joining a workshop. Or if you're an engineer, I'm married to an engineer, and every time I tell him I'm running a brainstorm for a product team, he's like, okay, are you going to be using people's ideas, or do I just have to throw a million Post-its on the board that you're going to ignore? So it's just, for some people, the word brainstorm is not generative and lovely and ooh, let us come together. Imagine. It's like, oh, we have to do this every quarter and you're wasting my time and you're not going to pick any of my ideas, and we're going to build the MVP, right? Like the small little feature that's going to get launched anyway. So the naming piece and how you frame that is really important. But for me, I'm biased, obviously, because I love workshops, and there are reasons not to do workshops. But for the most part, even just the idea to call it a workshop and to name it in that way feels to me so different and more energizing than the ways we typically come together.
Well, Amanda, look, I didn't give you a chance to give you the space for an introduction to the audience who might not know you. So please take it away.
Hi there. My name is Amanda Gelb. I see myself as a professional question asker. What that means is I predominantly do user experience and product research. I am in strategy. I am a workshop facilitator, and I am recently the founder of AHA Studio, which is helping teams get unstuck using research-driven aha moments, such as workshops and trainings.
Amanda, I'm just going to go straight into it. One of the key things I always found during my career being a UX designer was that the value that workshops can bring is enormous, but it also comes with a caveat. There are times where I have run workshops and it really kind of didn't get anywhere. As you just mentioned, people felt they were wasting times. And I think a lot of people in this industry, outside of UX, don't see the value what workshops can bring. So I wanted to get your take on this. I mean, how can designers harness a good workshop, from your opinion?
Absolutely. I want to start by addressing your kind of spicy opinion that workshops may be a waste of time, and say that maybe they are. If you don't need to be bringing a group of people together to make a collective decision that is difficult or unknown or contentious, then a workshop might not be the right approach. But in terms of where it is good to run a workshop or perhaps how to do it successfully, it's making sure that the workshop has, and jumping to the end here, making sure that the workshop has really clear outcomes and really clear next steps. I've been in so many workshops, and I used to run these also, right? Going back to the brainstorming that let's come up with 50 different ideas, and then we're going to dot vote, and then, okay, bye everyone. Thanks for your time. We ran out of time. Okay. Oh, you got to jump to another meeting. See ya, bye. And it's like, well, what's happening next? And so we think about backwards design as product people also, right? Like if you're designing a feature, you think, okay, how do I want the user to be experiencing this feature? Or what is the behavior that I'm trying to design around? Or what use case am I thinking about? You don't start designing something because it's fun and beautiful, and then it just lives in your product for the most part. And so it's so too when you're thinking about how to use people's time, that's the most valuable thing that people can give you. And you want to build that trust. You want people to know that, oh, Amanda's a trusted facilitator or moderator. I should show up for this workshop. I'm excited about it. It could take a few times before you build that trust in how you're using people's time. Because a lot of the workshops that I run are like 2 or 3 hours, which is really, especially for executives also, I've done a lot of executive workshopping. They don't like to part with that time. They kind of scoff at that and say like, oh, you can have 20 minutes maybe, right? Or like, talk to my admin, we'll figure out a way to work in part of that. Or they might, but then once they're in the room and they see the power of what you're trying to do, that can be transformed. But back to your question, that power of what you're trying to do and that transformation only happens if you start by thinking about what your objectives are and what the next steps are going to be, ideally coming out of your workshop. And then you design from there. Okay, what are the activities? What is the structure? What is the framing? How are we going to get to that outcome? Even if that outcome is, now we need to have another session, or now we need to create another design or do more research, or, it depends what your context is. But yeah, I would say also just zooming out, and feel free when you edit this to move it around. But there are different types of workshops also. So there are workshops to make decisions. There are workshops to create alignment. There are workshops to imagine and to dream and to think big. There are workshops that are incredibly business goals driven and strategic. I've run some workshops where our inputs were finances and revenue streams and metrics of how products did and didn't perform across various OKRs that we had set as a company. And it was a interactive way to approach that data set and those business goals. But it was really focused on the numbers. It wasn't just like, okay, let's do crazy eights and design, right? Like 8 different listeners are familiar with that. You fold a piece of paper right into 8 different parts, and not every workshop is necessarily that.
Yeah. But it's such a hard one, and there's so much for me to dissect just from that introduction. And I want to take a different turn on this. A lot of people who do workshops, and people who I've spoken to experience kind of 2 things. One, where they bring the whole Wu-Tang Clan, and it's like no decision is made. Or they do something with a small group, and then they get backlash to say, well, why didn't you bring me into that meeting? Why wasn't I involved? And it's always been one of those things I've noticed during my career, where you try and do a workshop and you think you're bringing the right people in. But what then happens is people feel left out if you don't involve them. They're saying, hey, that's part of my product. I should have been involved. And then you get the other side who say, well, yeah, I know more about this domain. I should be there. And then when you do bring them all in, nothing comes out of it. And that's only just from my experience. I'm not speaking like from the whole aspect. But what's your take on what I just said?
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard. The first piece, I think, is being really clear on who needs to be in the room. And this is, I might get unfollowers from this, but I don't think I'm a big tent researcher. I think everyone can listen in on my sessions and, comment on my discussion guide and read my test plan, or right. I know so many design partners who are like early, some designers like to kind of hide their designs and they're like, I'll show it to you when it's beautiful. And I always try push for them to show things earlier on. That is also helpful for workshops. There's a before, a during, and an after. And so the before stages, even just not just who you're inviting, but how you're communicating it. And so 2 examples from my own work in different directions. The first was, this just happened genuinely yesterday. I have a business to business client. Well, we'll scratch it. I have a B2B client, and this B2B client, we had done this really interesting foundational research for this big business bet. And it touches a lot of different teams, and it's very contentious, and the executive is very excited about it, which means that it's important, and everyone wants to be touching this new potential business area and set of features that we're building. And I had partnered with a designer to do all of this research. And initially we were going to do, are you ready? We were going to do a 50-person workshop. I kid you not, 50.
Whoa.
Which I have done
Okay.
before, and there are reasons to do that. But in this story, that was not the right idea. That was an initial idea of like, let's just include everyone, right? To your point, like this is a product or a surface area of a product that touches so many different teams. We want everyone to have ownership. We want everyone to be excited. We want everyone to have access to this data so that they're acting on it, right? That's the research dream. Like, okay, I can expose 50 different people across the company to this foundational research. Like, wow, what an audience. But in this case, that was not the right outcome for the workshop because the executive team were not fully aligned on what needed to happen next after the research. And they didn't want it to be a kind of Wild West where we put the research in front of 50 different people, gave them some really thoughtful activities, right? We could talk about the workshop activities later on, but they were like, wait a minute, this sounds like a nightmare idea. Because then we have whatever it is, 12 different teams acting on the data, and yes, the workshop kind of help the research be transmitted, but what happens next was a little too scary. And so what we ended up doing was hosting a workshop just for the executive team where we shared the research a little more formally, and then we had some thoughtful activities. So it was kind of a readout meets workshop. Somewhere in that Venn diagram there, like not fully one, not fully the other. And that was what was needed for that team. Now, on the other hand, when I was at a different company in-house, I was working also with an executive team on a future of X, whatever it was. And again, this was very business driven. What market should we enter? Where do we want to compete? What new hardware and software do we want to be building and investing in for the next 5-10 years? Hardware cycles for some of your listeners are a lot longer than software cycles. And so you need to make decisions sometimes truly 5 years out if you're getting. It takes China 2 years to make a prototype and send it to you. And anyway, they're longer cycles and you need to be really thinking ahead. And so I was helping a team think about the next 5 to 10 years of a particular area we were investing in. And the organization that this area was in was about 200 people and really passionate, invested. This was like a values-driven organization in terms of what we were building. And similarly, I was running a series of future-facing workshops to help us really imagine and then put into practice some of these ideas. And it was a really tight group, but we really wanted to democratize it and open it up a little bit more. And so I hosted a series of mini workshops. So I would do like a big workshop for the executive team, which in and of itself is like 20-25 people, right? All of the executives and VPs and whatnot. And then it was just like open hours with Amanda, like whoever wants to come, I'm going to make transparent to you most of the data sets that we were looking at, most of the activities that we went through. And I'm not going to expose what happened in that room, what other said, but I am going to give you the ability to weigh in. You, Mr. Engineer, you, Ms. Designer, whoever you are, come join us. We have this really rich set of activities we've come up with to think about the future of our product line. We want your opinions. Like, join us.
But that workshop that you just mentioned is the one that causes the most rifts, in my opinion. Vision planning, roadmap planning, or 5-year planning causes the most FOMO issues
Yes.
in companies. And it's a good example. I think you brought up a really, really good example where you've brought in the right people, but then the people who are just getting, how should you say, drip fed the information, again, bring up that feeling like, why didn't you involve me? Why was I not involved? So it's, how did you get past that?
We I hosted office hours for people to
Mm-hmm.
ask questions. I had these kind of mini workshops with various teams. I also, and this was more time, right? So when you think about trade-offs, this was a lot of my time, but myself, I advocated for this and I got only affirmation from this very thoughtful leadership team who realized if they did all of this vision thinking, right, that everyone wants a part of, everyone's kind of trying to claw their way into this meeting. And then
Mm-hmm.
we just stood up at a organizational or a line of business all hands and said, we did this thinking and here's our vision. It was going to fall on 200 ears that were going to be insulted and, like you said, FOMO'd and annoyed and embarrassed and like, are you kidding me? Like, I've been working for this company for 8 years and you just went off in a corner for a few hours and had your little magic vision session and now you're telling me the future of this, right? So we really wanted to avoid that and to bring everyone in. And so I also hosted sessions with various teams. So I
Mm-hmm.
went to cross-functional teams and I met with them at times where they, like, maybe they had a stand up or maybe they had a standing, I don't know, whatever it is, every other week kind of meeting for an hour. And I basically went to places where people were meeting anyway and took over the agenda with permission of the people that ran those agendas.
Yeah.
And I said, like, hey, I'd love to involve you all. I want to bring your voices in. And then I'm a researcher, right? So we we think about design, we think about research, we think about product from a customer perspective or a user perspective. There's so much
Mm-hmm.
rich data that we have wherever we work, whoever you're partnering with. If your client focus, if you have a set of clients, if you're at an agency, if you're in-house, your various cross-functional partners, your client teams, that's really important data to
Mm-hmm.
know. And so much about running a workshop is like who's in the room and who is your
Yes.
audience, right? It's kind of similar to giving a speech. Not that a workshop should be a speech. That's not what I'm saying, but they always say like, who your audience. No, you're right there. There's certain guidelines that are
Mm-hmm.
just known for speaking. And I think the same is true for workshops. You need to know who you're catering to, and that should end your backwards design, right? Your outcomes that you're trying to drive towards and the next steps, like what are people leaving the workshop with? And
Yeah.
then going from there, planning your activities around it. Those are the two most important things. I
But it,
went to these teams
no,
and
no, yeah, yeah, sorry.
yeah, I went to these
Sorry.
teams and said, hey, this is what I was super transparent. I'm like, this is what we're doing. I'm meeting with the executives and VPs or figuring out the future for the next 5 years of X, Y, and Z. And we would love your perspective. We would love for you to join us. And that was the research that I was, right? I conducted research on, I don't know, 50, 75 people, whoever raised their hands between office hours, the mini workshops, and me going to various product teams and running a few activities. And then I went back and I was like, okay, this is really helpful data. I'm actually going to use this as a data set that's going to be an input for our next workshop, right? Because it was a series of workshops. If there's something you're trying to figure out like a future of, that is generally not done in 2 hours. So
Yeah.
that was a whole input that I said, okay, everyone, here's a deck or a doc of summarized findings from 75 people across our organization. Read this, and we're going to spend the next 15 minutes of the workshop, when we meet next, discussing what this means or how we want to input this information.
But you see, Amanda, like as you just mentioned, when you've done a workshop, and this is why I got to play devil's advocate, and this is why I think a lot of UX designers or general people in the design field tend not to do workshops. You just mentioned you had to have a meeting with the small group, and then you've had to have several other catch ups and jump into stand ups to do some form, not of, I wouldn't say damage control, but more of the case that you had to start getting people around the idea and to drive them forward with the idea so they're more involved. Um, a lot happens in the design field with vision prototypes when you kind of say, hey, we're going to build a vision prototype. That's where we want to go. But you can see it is a full-time job just to say, hey, this is the idea. And to bring everyone along with it involves so much time and effort to bring the ideas. Like, this is why designers tend to say, hey, the only kind of workshop I do is show and tell. It's like I'm showing my design, here's a discovery, and getting feedback. Now, what's your take on what I just mentioned?
I think this is some real talk. Back to you. Two things. Number one, if you want to be a leader, this is part of your job. If you want to be a leader and you want to influence people's decisions, that doesn't happen in your design. That happens in understanding other people's motivations, in understanding what a different product team or a different competitor, or right, it's casting a wider net and understanding all of those components and playing at the strategy level. And that's not here, come with me into these pixels. And the pixels are incredibly important and very valuable in helping people make decisions. But if you want to be playing at a different level and you want to be senior or staff or principal, naming some of the roles, this is the neighborhood you need to play in. You need this set in order to succeed. I do think it definitely leaning into this skill set and learning to become the person that people came to when they thought they needed to gather people to make a decision, or they weren't sure if they needed or whatever. That really elevated me in my career. And I found it to be incredibly meaningful work, because if you run a workshop right, decisions will get made. Okay. And then the second thing. So the first thing is you need to do it if you want to be a leader. Sorry, you do. And also I'll say some of the best workshops I've attended were run by introverted people, were run by people that weren't particularly senior. I don't think you need to be a principal designer, if you're listening to this conversation, in order to run a workshop. There are small ways that you can play with one activity, or bring a smaller group together, or go to your design team that meets every week for crit anyway and start to play with some techniques. It's not like, okay, overnight, you're now going to be hosting this huge vision workshop for executives. That doesn't need to be the path. And you don't need to be an outgoing person in order to do that. So that's one. The second thing is the ROI of a well-facilitated workshop is not just better design or a stack of sticky notes or whatever. It's actually fewer meetings. So you were like, Amanda, oh, that sounds like it's so much of your time. You went here and you did that. You know how much time I saved myself and everyone else by doing that up front? It's like whenever you invest more in any project, right? The design or the research or the data, anytime you put in more thinking at the beginning of something, it saves everyone exponentially more time as you move forward in that thing's creation. And so too with workshops. If you're able to do a workshop at the beginning of something, you are saving yourself and everyone else fewer meetings later, because hopefully you have now a sense of everyone's shared mental model across various teams or across your teammates.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. I think, you're saving yourself so much effort if you just bring, if you do all that hard work in the beginning, as you just mentioned, you're just saving yourself, again, repeated meetings, wasted meeting, and wasted time. And I love that you mentioned that statement. Amanda, one of the key questions I always get, and it's also something that we also look in Design Also Aligned. Do you think the ability to build a good collaborative space is important for workshops?
Yes and no. I know that that's a cheating answer, but let me explain.
Go for it.
It's incredibly helpful when you can get to a collaborative state. And the most juicy, interesting, productive workshops I've been a part of on the whole where people had vehemently different opinions, but the workshop was able to, number one, surface those so you know who you're dealing with and what their opinions are. And number two, get us to a different place. So kind of transcend, not be stuck. And I think when you were talking about communication earlier, and that obviously ties into this, the collaboration piece, so many conversations that we have are circular. You can kind of get stuck in this same, right? Where like, I think we've all been in those kinds of conversations where you're just like, why am I having this conversation again with this person? Didn't we just have this conversation last week? Or they keep asking you the same set of questions. It's giving people a different modality to break out of that is really powerful. But to kind of shift the energy. And then if you do have people that have really divergent opinions, I personally love, and again, I'm a researcher, so this is my bias. I love doing stakeholder interviews. So I may interview the people that are in the workshop with me if it's something that's particularly salacious or something that is very vague, or something where there's a lot of internal disagreement or potential for people to get kind of grabby, like, oh no, that's my piece of real estate. No, that's my piece of, right. If we're touching on something where there maybe isn't going to be that lovely collaborative spirit and everyone's not going to have their arms around each other singing Kumbaya, which very rarely happens in workshops anyway. But if you
Yeah.
have a spidey sense that you're tapping into a topic or an area that's contentious in that way, I will go off and I'll formally interview everyone individually. And again, about time, this is time. I've brought everyone together for an incredibly rare 2 hours where everyone is hopefully just focusing on whatever the set of activities and prompts are that I've created. And I want to know who they are before I go in the room. And I want to know what they believe about this contentious thing. And so I'll interview them. I did this at a different company. We were launching a new loyalty program, and the company had never had a loyalty program before. And it was heated internally across a number of senior level stakeholders. And I was on the product team, and we needed to decide what set of features we were building and how our loyalty program was going to work. We'd never done it before. This is new for the company and, a big bet and very exciting. And I just said, like, team, like, trust me, just give me a week and a half before we gather to think about our features. Let me just talk to some people. And I wrote to the CEO and the co-founder, and I wrote to the chief technology officer. I wrote to the whole C-suite. And you know what? They wrote back to me within like minutes, if not hours, because we were doing something that they were very invested in. Now, listen, I didn't want them in the workshop because this happens also, right? If you have people of different seniority levels, that's something that you need to think about as a moderator. But I wanted their perspective because the truth was, thinking about saving time, if we were going to have this whole workshop and then need to go up in front of the C-suite anyway to get approval of what we were doing, I didn't want us to waste 2 months of team design or engineering just to hear a no for something that we easily could have gotten in a 30-minute interview. So I really asked, and we get to do this as product people also, right? Like, because I think we are designers and we're researchers, we're a little more unbiased, and we get to ask really difficult questions, which is one of the favorite parts of my job. And so I didn't hold back when I interviewed, this C-suite team. And I said, like, what keeps you up at night about our loyalty program failing? And like, why is now the moment that we need to do this? And like, oh, look at our competition. Do you think theirs is always going to be much better than ours? Like, I asked these really juicy questions, and then I brought those contentious opinions purposely into the team workshop. And I said, hey, here's what everyone thinks. And I mapped them on a 2x2, right? So I said, like, okay, look, these leaders are in this corner and these other leaders are in that corner. And we need to decide here in this workshop, these are the voices that we need to be at least knowing about, if not listening to, as we think about the design.
It's one of the key things, and you mentioned conflict or divergent opinions. Let's put it in a better way. Divergent opinions do cause a lot of conflicts in general because, and it's very, very weird because everyone's working in the same company. We're all taking different routes to Rome, but it's when those divergent opinions come into workshops, what would you say is the key thing to, one, calm them down? And I know you mentioned, you said take their opinions, go back. But when you're in a workshop and you've just spent hours setting it up, and sometimes there can be kind of conflict of interest in those types of workshops, what advice would you give to people in that situation?
Yes. Okay. Big picture, you want to harness the diverse viewpoints or conflict towards a shared goal, right? So I don't know if it's ego-driven or people just have very strong ponies that they're championing, but reframing in terms of like, hey, we're trying to build a better product, or we're here to make a decision about X. Like, we're on a team and we have a shared goal. So anchoring people in that is really helpful from a mindset perspective. And then detachment techniques are a really great exercise to do. So that's where people advocate for positions that they don't personally hold. Actually,
Okay.
Have an opinion that's way off here to the right, I'm going to be like, please help me defend this idea to the left, right? Or like, you don't think we should build this, whatever, this new set of features. Tell me, like, defend it. Why should we build these features? What can these features give us?
I love that. That's such a cool idea. That is so. Let me get this right. If somebody is conflicting with one idea, you basically put them on the other side, and they have to defend that
Yeah.
idea, or
Yeah, they have to advocate for it. And
oh
I've done
wow,
times where it's like a fun Shark Tank exercise where they have two
yeah,
to create a pitch, right? You can create energy and excitement around this. It's not like I force them to hold up this other opinion for a whole 30-minute activity. It can be quick and energetic, but just getting people to at least consider another perspective by advocating for it. That's
wow.
one thing. Yeah.
I love that. That's really cool. That's a really, really cool. Any more? Have you got any more?
Yes, yes, I do. Okay, let me think. Another thing to do, if you're comfortable with this, is actually to capture the conflict. So when I went off and I interviewed those executives and they had those divergent opinions and I put it on a map, maybe you haven't done that pre-work or you didn't have the luxury of those stakeholder interviews. You could still capture the conflict on your whiteboard or your digital whiteboard, in the way that people have like a parking lot or a questions for the future. Have you heard of that
Yeah,
kind of concept?
yeah, yeah,
Okay, this is great, but we're not focusing on it right now. We're going to stick it over there, the parking lot. There's a lot of
yeah,
car metaphors. So you
yeah, yeah.
could do that for conflict also, right? Like you could have
Oh,
an area where you're documenting the disagreement to explore in the future. So you're still validating someone's opinion. You're still listening to it. You're like, look, I wrote it down. I'm putting it over here. I see that we're in disagreement. But again, we want to make a decision about blah, blah, blah. And this is where it's not just the activities that you come up with, but the moderation. How are you showing up in a confident way? How are you and for this I'd say also it's really important to set rules up front. Maybe you call them guidelines, but they're softer ways to say that. Um, Agreements, some people say,
yeah,
here are
yeah,
agreements, but you have to give yourself permission as the person running the workshop to interrupt, to shut things down, right? So the conflict capture, let's say someone's having a really contentious conversation and it's totally devolving. Of course, it's definitely going to happen. That's not the moment where I'm like, hey, everybody, look what I have over here. It's this like
yeah,
little area of our digital whiteboard where I created a conflict capture area. No, I introduced that at the beginning of the workshop when we spoke about the agreements of how we were all coming together. When I said, I want you to be off screen. When I said, please try not to distract yourself. When I said, try only speak for a minute or two at the time. I want to hear from everyone. I also gave myself permission to say, there are times where this might get heated. That is welcome. Please try optimize kindness and disagree
yeah,
in a polite way. We love disagreement. Let's hear it. And let's also do that thoughtfully. And also, we're not in this wonderful few hours that we have together going to accomplish everything that we want to and have every conversation. And so at times I might interrupt you. It has nothing to do with what you're saying or if I agree with you or not. I just want to make sure we're collectively achieving that outcome, right? And I'll state it. This is what we're trying to do. I say that in the beginning. So I might interrupt you so that we can achieve this outcome. And because I gave myself permission to do that at the beginning of the workshop and I set that very clear moderator guideline for myself, then when it's happening and it is contentious, that's when I'm like, hey, like I totally know this is super important. I see that we have different perspectives here. I don't want to lose the important things that you're saying. I'm going to write them down exactly. Look, I've put them over here. Let's definitely revisit that. But I want to make sure that we return our attention to X, whatever the thing is that I'm trying to get
yeah,
us
yeah,
all to do next. And see,
yeah.
I
But
did that. Yeah.
no, no, go, carry on because there's something that really aligns to what I just mentioned a second ago. So please, yeah,
Yeah. I gave them permission in the beginning to disagree. I said that that was okay. I welcomed it. And I gave myself permission to interrupt and to keep us
yeah.
moving forward towards that shared goal. So if and when that happened, it was already in the back of people's minds. And then I was able to interject with this little device of the conflict capture.
But it goes back to what I mentioned about having the ability of collaboration skills and collaboration. And I think from a design perspective, a lot of people who are going to be watching this podcast come from a design field. In order to be good in collaboration, you need to be able to speak up. You know, when you're working with designers, you have that ability to speak up or interrupt, or because most designers who work with designers have that kind of safe haven space. But when it's in a workshop, you have to bring those collaborative skills and the ability to moderate, and again, firmly, as you just mentioned, to interrupt and to how should you say, diverge the conversation back to the agenda. That takes a lot of courage and a lot of how should you say, confidence that generally I would say designers are not really taught to do.
That's true. That's true. I do think we should all be practicing this and learn this skill set. It might not be the most comfortable, but
Mhm.
perhaps you're a parent and you've been a parent of toddlers, and you need to get out of the house and your kid won't put on their shoes. And so what do you say to them? You don't like pick them up and shove their shoes on. I mean, maybe sometimes you do that because you have
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
You're like, okay,
I've been known to do that. I've been known to do that. I'm running late. I'm running late, and I need to get them to put their shoes on. So I just literally
yes,
sometimes,
fair.
yeah,
No judgment. Everyone's doing their best as parents. So if you're a parent, you're doing your best. But maybe you'll say to them, right? Like, okay, sweetie, do you want to wear the blue shoes today or do you want to wear the red shoes? You're giving them a fake choice or some sort of agency. So that technique you might have in your personal life and not even realize you're doing that, then you bring that into your work life. You're running a workshop or you're having a one-on-one with someone and it's difficult, or you're pitching some designs. You give two choices. Okay, I've sketched this up. I actually have a quick mock here in my pocket that I've been thinking about for this future of this one or this one. Guess what? You love both of them. They're just a little bit different, right? And so it's not needing to draw something from scratch. You've given it thought and you're giving choices. Maybe people listening have a partner and you sometimes argue with your romantic partner, or you have a friend. You asked me at the beginning of this call, like, how do people know when you're BSing, right? Or what do you think?
yeah, yeah. I mean, you can't. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to say that bit. That's bits off. I edit that bit out. So
This
we're
job
gonna
is
edit that bit out.
it's gone. It's gone. It never happened. Fine. New idea.
Yeah,
But yeah, let's say you have friends and you can tell that your friends are, things get difficult if you're in any real relationships, which I hope your listeners are outside of work. This stuff comes up. You don't always agree with everyone and get along, and it's so lovely. I definitely feel that way right now about geopolitical life, right? They're just life right now is pretty complex, and we don't all agree, and that's okay. But there are these really powerful things that I would guess that we're doing anyway in our personal lives that we can bring into our work lives in terms of how we offer two choices, or we pause and we say that we heard someone, but actually we have a slightly different opinion. Or, right, there are these little devices that we do as humans, and everyone has different ones because how you communicate is uniquely you. But I would say maybe a first step, in addition to hopefully trying out a few of these techniques and being in the front of the room a little bit more as designers and design leadership, listening, in addition to doing that, pay attention to who you are and how you're navigating difficult conversations in your personal life, because I bet you do have a style. You just have to kind of listen to yourself to see how that works for you, and then try bring that in an appropriate way to your work life also.
Amanda, it's frustrating though, isn't it? You know, it's a frustrating aspect of the job, and especially as design leaders. My time being a design leader, director, you name it. And this is just from my personal experience. I can be right, I can be wrong with this, but from my personal experience, it was the case of too many cooks spoil the broth. We've all heard that saying, and then it came down to, you know, you put so much effort into getting everyone aligned, and it just takes one piece of that puzzle to not fit to then stop that idea. And I'm talking from just experience of, when you've got an idea and you've got a vision and you're trying to do so many workshops to get everyone aligned and get everyone in track, and then all of a sudden somebody puts their 2 cents in, and it's just like, hey, we need to go back to the drawing board and go back to planning. It's a frustrating thing, don't you think?
Yes, I do. I absolutely do. And this comes up a lot when I run trainings for teams around this topic of like, why do we have to be the ones to do this, right? Like, the engineers are off having what's it called? The engineers are off having an escape room
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to talk about how to navigate conflict better and how to bring people together and how to be leader. Like, why don't other disciplines have to deal with this, you know?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it sucks. It's not nice to feel that way per se, but I strongly think the best cross-functional leadership that I've worked with, and I've been really blessed to know senior product folks and chief technology officers and people in different disciplines, they have these skills for the most part, or they at least needed to utilize these skills to get to where they are. Because at the end of the day, you're not trying to influence someone. You know, the goal of your workshop is not, okay, come aboard my idea. It's see yourself in my idea, and
Nice.
you need people to to be able to open up a little bit or for some kind of understanding or opinion to know that you've done that or to at least give them the opportunity to do that.
You want to know? I'm going to do some product placement. Excuse me while I do this. One of the best workshops I've always done, and we still do it at Design Ops Align. We actually get a lot of requests for this. And it's one of the workshops we do to really bring everyone back to ground zero into some sense of like, we're all equal in this idea. And it's our Lego Serious Play workshop. So we bring a whole bunch of boxes. I would love to show you how many boxes we have, about 10 boxes of these Lego Serious Play. It's just so everyone knows, Lego Serious Play, you can order it online. We'll drop the comments. We'll drop the link in the comments below so that you can order it if you want. No affiliation at all. It's just something that we think will bring a lot of value. But yeah, we bring this Lego Serious Play pieces, bring everyone in, and it really does get everyone to see different perspectives, to also see different sides to the idea, and it really does get everyone very, very aligned. So have you ever done a Serious Play workshop?
I have not, but I am so curious about it, and I've heard such amazing things. And I think what it's tapping into, if I may, is this idea of embodied cognition that I think about a lot
Yes.
as a facilitator. How do you bring
Yeah.
in multiple modalities, right? Like our best thinking isn't happening when we're sitting still, for me at least, like it's going for a walk or taking a shower, or right? The next breakthrough isn't going to be because we're both staring at a screen at each other. Most likely, our bodies can solve these problems that our brain doesn't even necessarily know that it has. So, yeah, I was actually in a facilitator group yesterday, and someone mentioned bringing in these little Lego figures and starting every workshop by having people come up with some sort. There's like a scenario that he'll give
Yeah.
people, and they have to
Yeah.
act out a scenario using a random figure, and it's tied into the workshop. You can be so creative with this, but just breaking people out of their common
Yes.
biases and right, like it's so workshops are so powerful for doing that. Also, in the past,
Absolutely.
sometimes if it's a smaller workshop or we have budget, I'll send people a physical goodie box if it's a virtual workshop, and I'll say they can't open the box until the workshop, and it's like this mystery goodie bag. And then there's a moment where they have to open it up, and there's like something to smell and something to play with and something to touch and something to listen to, and just thinking about bringing in our full body is
Yeah.
really powerful. Yeah.
Well, it's something that we've also tried to delve into on our side, how to do it online. Now, it does involve some logistics behind it. You got to make sure the people involved are going to have Lego. So it's really easy if you know that people have kids, you know, they're going to have some form of Lego, some form of Duplo, doesn't matter. But we really got past the point of how to do it online. But it is more beneficial when people are there together. Um, and one of the key things we tend to do before we go to a company or before they've actually asked us to do the workshop or to get involved in some of their product ideation, we do interviews with them to really find out what kind of color they are. So we use this Bible. We use this thing called Surrounded by Idiots. Brilliant book. I'm actually going to be doing a talk on it next week at Airtime. Please attend if you can. I'll put the link in the show notes. And so we kind of know what kind of person they are and what kind of things they want to be communicated. And then when we do these workshops, we make sure we pair them up with different colors that do tend to work with each other. So we obviously our guesses are like, oh yeah, she's a yellow, he's a blue, he might be a red, but we try and make sure that those colors are paired up in some sense. And then we kind of go to workshop in that way. So that's the end of my product placement.
Enjoying the content? Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram for more updates. Your support helps us bring you even more great content. Now let's get back to our podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. We just had a little intermission. You know, we do have businesses to look after while doing the podcast. Amanda had to go off and deal with her clients, and now she's back again. We'll make sure the audience knows because there's going to be a little break in between. Amanda, I want to delve into this last topic I wanted to bring up, and I think it's really the case about workshops really getting buy-in from stakeholders. Now, there's a lot of people who do state that when they do make when they do create workshops, I would say, as you mentioned, C-suite people tend not to give their time, and we can understand that, but generally a lot of stakeholders say it's a waste of time, you know, or just give me the cliff notes, give me the findings that come out of it. And what would you say to people who want to get buy-ins from really stakeholders to come in there to be part of this collaboration process?
The first thing that you can do is tell them how you're going to use their time. I think this is a quote, I don't remember who said it, that clarity is kindness. And I think any workshop, just like any meeting without an agenda, should not happen. You should be really intentional when you're deciding to host a workshop. So even though I love them and I think they're great for a number of reasons, if you're trying to make a decision tomorrow, right, and a decision needs to be made no matter what, and people are on different time zones, then maybe a live workshop is not the right approach.
No, it's as you mentioned. I think, you know, it's one of the key things that we get asked a lot. Like, how do I do a great workshop? Because most of the time when we come in to companies as Design Ops Online, we're really doing a lot of workshops. I would say 80% or 90% of the work is workshops, bringing people together, bringing in the right people together. And we get that backlash as well, where people say, "Oh, look, I don't have the time. Just give me the report. Just give me the findings, etc., etc." And it's pretty disheartening when you want those key stakeholders to be there. But then, as you mentioned, I think you mentioned a good point. Like, really bring out an agenda, what you're going to get out from this workshop. But I'm going to ask it in a different way.
Wait, can I say something quickly to that?
Sure. Go for it.
I think you also need to be honest with yourself about if they need to be in the workshop or you want them to be in the workshop.
Yeah.
Do you want an executive in your workshop because it looks good for you and because you want to impress your manager or your colleagues? Or do you really need your executive's opinion live over a possibly multi-hour, 1 hour period? Do you need your executive to go through a series of activities? That's something that again, time is the biggest gift that people can give you and the biggest resource that we're up against. Many of us, especially if you're in-house, are in back-to-back meetings all the time and have such precious little time to do any of the actual craft or any of the actual work. People are so hungry for that. So if you're putting a big block of time or any block of time on someone's calendar, you better be sure that you need them and why you need them. And so it could be helpful to do a little gathering map or activity map before you send your invites out and really ask yourself, do I need this person here? What is their purpose? What perspective do I want them to bring? And if you've done that work, then you can tell them. And that makes the case for them to join your workshop. Like, hey, Naresh, just me popping 3 hours on I'm making up a long workshop, but if I pop 3 hours of your calendar on Friday and I write brainstorm ! We're going to come together to generate ideas for a new blah, blah, blah. Maybe that gets some people excited, but you might be thinking like, who is this Amanda? She just put 3 hours over my focus time or over these other meetings for me to just come up with some random ideas for something. Feel how that feels versus me saying, hey, Naresh, like, I've sent you an individual email or a Slack or whatever. We're having a coffee chat anyway. And I say, like, listen, I'm hosting this workshop. I'm super excited about it. here's what I want us to do. It's not just going to be a regular brainstorm. I want us to really think about how we improve this common pain point that we've experienced. And so it's going to be a workshop all around this one most painful pain point. And I want us to be really thoughtful in this workshop about how we come up with actual solutions that we could build, not just pie in the sky ideas. And I thought of you for this workshop, Naresh, because I love your design perspective, right? That feels really different to be invited to a workshop when you frame it that way. So you should, no one has a right to just throw things on everyone's calendars for long periods of time and expect everyone to be so excited about that. If you're asking for people's perspective, making it super clear why you need their perspective is a really great way to get them bought in.
But then it does tie down to catering to their ego, isn't it? As you just mentioned, and I think that statement that you just mentioned, it does resonate with some, and it does resonate with a few who still kind of push back. They're still like, and I think I'm using the example of developers. Those are the really, really ones. And, as designers or coming from a design field, trying to collaborate with them is a very, very hard thing due to the fact they have a different mindset. But I love that. I do love that statement that you did put there. And you actually took the question out of my mouth. Like, do you actually really need those people? I want to get your take on this last question. Now, we always talk about in the design field, and especially in design leadership as well, that communication is very, very important. And generally communications is a very wide thing, Would you say the ability to storytell, okay, or actually, let me put it in a better way to you. Would you say the ability to communicate in workshops is just as important as the ability to storytell?
Yeah. I want to say more. Am I allowed to say more important?
Of course you can.
Because if you're telling a story, you don't always have ownership over it. Your story may look like a deck where you've put together a presentation and it's been emailed out. You don't know if people are skimming it, if they're listening to a podcast if they've looked at it, what they think of it. You wrote a particular word or used a metaphor. Did that land? That you can't really always receive people's reactions to that storytelling, even if it was beautifully crafted, or control for attention. You want to be really thoughtful when you run a workshop and not just run a workshop to run a workshop. But let's say a workshop is what needs to happen. You have everyone's attention. I mentioned earlier that time is the most important commodity. Even if you get on people's calendars, even if they show up for your 2-hour Zoom workshop or they're in the physical room with you, that doesn't mean you have their presence.
Mm-hmm.
So, and same for storytelling. So in order to really command attention and to have their presence and to feel like they have ownership and they're co-creating whatever the thing is with you and how you've designed the activities and how you framed it and how you've welcomed them into the space, all of those different components of you really being a host in this workshop, that I think is incredibly more powerful than just telling a loose, like a narrative. And I love storytelling. I think it's incredibly important and essential for designers and for all of us product people, of course. But we can't control if anyone's paying attention to the story or how it's received for the most part, even when we're doing a live session, because it's mostly frontal learning, right? Like normally a story is told. You're listening to the story and it's just Amanda speaking and saying, all right, our hero user woke up this morning and she was in Minnesota but needed to get to Kentucky and, whatever it is, there's some hero journey that someone's going on it, right? There are different techniques in storytelling, which are fabulous devices, but you don't know if people are zoning out and there aren't moments for their reaction. There aren't moments for their participation in a really thoughtful way. And I think if you're designing a workshop, the whole point of it is that it's not a conversation. It's not frontal. It's by its very nature, interactive, immersive, forces you to have an opinion, to put a perspective out there, to hear other people's, to grapple collectively with a particular decision or idea or whatever it is that you're trying to do in your session.
So Amanda, I'm going to drop this question as my last question to you before we wrap up the show. And I think one of the key things I wanted to mention why I brought you onto the show is I see a lot on social media where they advertise the UX field or the design field, where they're showcasing, how to use Figma and how to do all this fancy stuff. And again, I do rip into that sort of stuff, but there are a lot of other content creators who show great stuff about the UX, like how do you do good UX principles and how do you communicate with stakeholders, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the key things I don't see is how do you do good workshops? And what would you say to people that's listening to this podcast to evangelize the importance of having the right skills to do workshops, from your opinion?
Yeah. Okay. A few things. Number one, workshop facilitation and everything that goes into it, being able to organize a group of people, to position yourself as a leader, to articulate principles and goals, to tap into the business outcomes and how your design or your product or whatever you're doing maps to that, and to lead people from point A to point B in that process, which is what the goal of a workshop facilitator is. That's how you move from being a junior designer to a design leader. That's the bridge from IC, right, from individual contributor to strategic partner. And then design tools change all the time. Like it's Figma right now. Maybe it will be something else in 5 years. It used to be the Adobe suite. Like there are a million different tools that we're continuing to use. But when you think about your career, which is hopefully very long, the collaboration skills compound. And that is the value that you bring. I think the craft and your eye and that's incredibly important. That's one component. But how you are communicating that thing, how you are getting people to feel ownership of it and to make decisions and actions based on that skill, that's beyond just solving design problems, right? That's aligning organizations around user needs, which is the goal, or organizational needs. It's also smart for you. You want to know who you're dealing with. If you're a designer and you're trying to push a particular design forward, or you're a content strategist and you're like, oh, I really think we need to change our tone in this particular part of the product, you might come up against a lot of resistance if you do that on your own as the solo person, rewriting whatever it is. But if you know who is going to be against you and why, then you can counter that really thoughtfully, or you can bring them in, or you can speak to why your content or your design or whatever it is that you do actually helps in this particular way. Or you can go off and gather data. But the point is, you are so much more informed to do your job and your craft well, understanding the people around you and where they stand, and having them feel ownership over your work. And like they've been a part of it too.
So that's a brilliant answer. I really, really I like that one. And I think you touch on many, many different points. You can't do it on your own. And if you bring people along, sorry, there's a fly in my thing. I'm going to still keep that bit in because it's still important. I think you really done justice with that answer, because as you mentioned, you can't do things on your own. And bringing people along with the ride really does bring much more collaboration and less, what should you say, friction to get your idea to production. So brilliant. Amanda, if people want to reach out to you and get in touch with you and generally, would like to use your services, when would be the right time? And, I would leave the space open for you to talk about what you actually do and how people can work with you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, LinkedIn or email is the best way. It's my last name and then my first name, gelbamanda@gmail.com. But I think most people are on LinkedIn these days, and I like the informal chat. So feel free to DM me or follow me, and we can chat that way. I post a medium amount about these kinds of ideas. And then in terms of me and my services, I love running workshops and trainings. So if I can be of use to your team to help you figure out how to run workshops, that's definitely one of my offerings that I've really enjoyed developing this year is advanced workshopping, helping teams that already know how might we's and sticky notes and dot voting elevate their workshop offerings internally and, with the people that they're working with. And I'll come in and work with you and your teams and train you to do that well. So that's another offer that I'm particularly excited about these days. And then, I conduct research and love doing that as well. So if there's anything that you need research assistance for, feel free to reach out.
Brilliant. We will drop. Sorry, I'm just coming back off a flu. We actually had to cancel our show because I've been ill, so I'm still kind of recovering from this. But I'm glad me and Amanda really got to speak today. We've been postponing it, going back and forward with topics and everything. So I'm really glad that we did hit the nail on the head today and got the show done. But we will drop her LinkedIn profile in our show notes. Put up any links up to her website or anything that she can provide to us. And please get in touch with Amanda. She is very, very open and very warm to anyone that reaches out to her. We got in touch with her to come onto the show, and she gave us the time, and we were very honored that she did come onto the Design Ops Aligned podcast show. So Amanda, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for being patient while I've been recovering. It's, the flu season is terrible. So,
yes. Likewise. Yeah. Be safe. Drink lots of tea.
Yeah. I'll be doing that, and I'll be making sure I get good night's sleep because it's a late filming today. So Amanda made me wait up until a late night, but no. But no, it's been a pleasure, and we would definitely love to have you back on the show. So
yeah, I'd love to be back. Thanks for having me.